I feel good. I feel strong. I'm about a little more than a third, I'd say, maybe half. Getting close.
It's just going to be an amazing work of art in and of itself, but it's also going to teach people. It's going to give them, a glimpse of history.
He was very clear that that would probably be the most challenging wall he'd ever done in his career.
This is a man on a mission. I mean, this is an extraordinary devotion to history, to art, to culture. He's up there painting for all of us.
A couple of more years, I don't know if I would have the stamina and the strength to do it. I would say at this time in my life, this is more than a perfect wall. This is the wall. It's a miracle wall. You drive through the mountains, the rugged terrain, and suddenly before you is a wide, peaceful, green valley.
Inspiration for much of Vigil's work comes from this remote area of northern New Mexico, known as Los Güeros. His great-grandfather was the hermano mayor of this small community.
Hermano mayores are elected by the hermanos to be the head of the community, of the hermanos from that area.
Following Mexican independence from Spain in 1821, church authorities in Mexico withdrew the missionaries and deprived many secluded communities of a resident clergyman.
The hermanos took over the religious, social, and political organization of a community, and this of Los Güeros here.
They gathered in meeting houses like this one, known as moradas.
This was the church, it was the city hall, it was the mayor's office, it was the place that kept this community together.
Los Hermanos Penitentes are best known for their songs of worship called alabados for processions during Holy Week, which end with the reenactment of Christ's crucifixion on Good Friday.
When something affects me or I see it visually, then I have a reaction to that where I would like to paint it.
Northern New Mexico has a long and deep religious history. For more than 12,000 years, many cultures have settled here and declared this land sacred. The Indians who currently make up the 19 pueblos trace some of their ancestry to the Anasazi cultural area of Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Centuries later, the Spanish conquistadors came here in search of gold.
Spanish were probably among the best conquerors and imperialists that the 16th century knew. I mean, these guys didn't just come and plant themselves in 13 colonies in North America and sort of nurture it for a couple of hundred years. They were all over the world.
The nature of early Spanish colonization in New Mexico continues to be a subject of heated debate. Some historical accounts paint a picture of harmonious blending of cultures. Other accounts emphasize the brutal nature of the Spanish conquistadors. The challenge for Frederico would be to paint a rich and colorful history on 4,000 square feet of wall space.
History is interpreted by many different people with different lenses for different reasons. And sometimes history is more about the present than it is about the past. And that was really blown out in this case.
The debate really was centered around what was going to be on there. Was it all going to be New Mexico? Was there enough Native American in it? Was there enough European in it? Was there enough Mexican in it? Was there enough Central American in it? There was so many different ideas of what what should be on it.
You know, even within the Hispanic community, there was a lot of objections to some of the ideas that were presented because it wasn't Albuquerque enough, or it wasn't totally Spanish, or it was too Indian, and what are the blacks doing in there? And you know, there's no common adversary. You get beat up on all sides.
But I don't think it ever affected, you know, our discussions in saying, well, maybe we should back off on being too Mexican or too Indian. Because if you look at the top of the fresco, I mean, that's what it is. That's where the history begins here.
Well, I think one of the myths that has been promulgated by us is, and I was guilty as anyone early on in my teaching career, that the culture of Spain was transferred intact into Mexico and New Mexico. The other myth was that we were different from the Mexicanos in Mexico, that we were an enclave right here in New Mexico that was different from them. The only reason we're different is because the line was drawn down by El Paso and separated us from Mexico.
The Mexican painters were encouraged to paint about the cultural realities of Mexico. And New Mexico is, I mean, it's not an extension of Mexico, it is Mexico. It's a part of Mexico that happens to be inside the borders of the United States.
That's why this fresco is going to talk about those things and our inner relationship of each other and our closeness to each other.
Fred has some very, very deeply grounded ideas of what New Mexican culture is about. And he found this by just growing up in Santa Fe and living in Taos and seeing all of these cultural traditions that surround us. They're not in isolation. They've always been referencing each other, and in really wonderful ways.
Frederico was born May 27, 1946. He was one of 7 children, including 5 boys and 2 girls.
We moved to Canyon Road when it was a dirt road. I had a wonderful childhood.
He is proud to say he grew up in the barrio along Canyon Road. Today, Canyon Road is a major gallery center, but in his youth, it was still unpaved.
We had 3 or 4 corner grocery stores. So every time you walked in, there was that dialogue and communication. Everybody knew each other, or they knew who your parents were, which was sometimes they'd catch up to you.
Frederico first learned the bond fresco technique in the 1980s from the disciples of the great Mexican painter Diego Rivera. Lucien Bloch and Stephen Dimitrov were already in their 80s, and they wanted to pass the tradition on.
I remember they were so organized and so structured. Like I remember not cleaning one of the brushes after we're painting. He said, "Hey pal, Rivera would have fired your..." But I really enjoyed their company.
For Frederico, bon or true fresco is the ultimate and noblest of painting, a technique that dates back over 5,000 years. True fresco involves the application of 5 layers of plaster made from a mixture of lime and sand. The first 3 layers take 10 days to dry. Frederico paints onto the final 5th layer, known as the intonaco, while it is still wet. He grinds pure natural pigments, sands, lime, and colored soils from the earth of New Mexico to a fine powder, then brushes them onto a wet plaster. He has painted with oils, acrylics, pastels, and charcoals, but nothing thrills him as much as fresco. He sometimes paints for 15 or 16 hours at a time.
The amount of hours that it takes, I crave it. So I crave wanting to paint that again, that level of hours and hours and hours of painting. I used to copy my paintings. Like I would have my design right next to me, and I'd be painting and looking like that. That I eliminated a while back, because it's even copying your own work, it doesn't give it the power and the flow and the freedom that you want. I try to see how much the wall allows me to go. Sometimes some colors won't get on and you can feel the wall just isn't pulling the color in anymore, so it's drying. So I take it all the way until she doesn't let me caress her anymore.
What Frederico is doing here, I think there was a certain amount of maturity that had to take place. Although he surrounded himself with book people to get this thing done, he's not painting from books. He's painting from life.
You know what I think more? It's the end. I dream about the last brushstroke. I really do.